Welcome back, everybody, to the Europe playoffs for Grandmasters Season 2. Now we have an actual match in front of us between SilverName and Bunnyhoppor. The winner of this one is going to move forward in the bracket to contest Hunter Ace, who has that luxury of the free win in the double elimination bracket. And Abar, now that we have some actual deck lists and an actual match to talk about, what do you think of these lineups?
No surprises, frankly. Bunnyhoppor has been protecting his shaman and banning his opponent's shamans at any given opportunity, even before the release of the new cards, where shaman has definitely gotten more powerful.
Right.
So I am not surprised at all to see that out of Bunny. SilverName protecting his priest. Again, when I was looking at his lineup, it is what I was expecting. I'm interested to watch over the course of the weekend, actually, how many people become Protect Shaman gamers, because Protect Priest has been the standard go-to up until this point.
Yeah, and Bunnyhopper's just going to come out like, yeah, I had it right all along.
Yeah,
you
exactly,
just protect your shaman.
Nothing
What
new.
are you guys doing? We are going to be kicking things off with a priest mirror. So I guess a matter of meet the new boss, same as the old boss in this situation. The one thing that has not changed too much in this new metagame is that priest is still a hell of a deck, Avar.
Yeah, it remains to be seen if it is still the best deck.
Sure.
I'm personally not convinced. I think Shaman might be it, but nothing particularly surprising out of either one of these priests. Double Pyromancer in both lineups. I know that makes you happy.
It certainly does, yeah. The cutting of one Pyromancer, I think, was dramatically reducing players' abilities to come back onto the board. I think players were doing it, making room for double silence for the Priest Mirror. But honestly, I feel like Pyromancer isn't a bad card in the Priest Mirror a lot of the time anyway, because of the swings it can create with Topsy-Turvy and other cards as well to come back onto the board. And since it is the Priest Mirror that we'll be facing down, if you guys have watched just about any of the weeks of Hearthstone Grandmasters up until this point, you will be intimately familiar with what a Priest Mirror looks like, Avar.
Yeah, it is a matchup that tends to snowball very quickly for the player who finds an early game edge, which is why you will see so much emphasis put on the mulligan phase between the two players, making sure that they find the perfect cards they need to secure the early board state. And then once they secure it, tends to snowball from there, so don't lose turns 1 through 3.
Sounds about right. While we are just taking a few moments to try and get into this matchup, I want to talk about the one kicker in these lineups, which for me is SilverName's Zoo. Is this a deck that you have any experience with in the new metagame? Obviously, Imp Gang Boss is the big card that's come in to really make an impact to Zoo.
I need very few excuses to pick up my Imp Gang Bosses again. That is one of my all-time favorite cards. I have about 7,000 wins of Warlock on my America's account.
Whoa, okay,
mostly
nice.
from playing Zoo.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm a big fan. These lineups are interesting to me because the last two decks, the non-priest, non-shaman decks by both players, have set up sort of a rock, paper, scissors where the Zoo is favored against the Druid, but then the Druid's favored against the Warrior, and so going into Game 3, it's going to be very important what they line up into each other's decks.
Have you seen the interaction between Imp Gang Boss and Quest Druid Starfall?
Imp Gang Boss and Quest Druid. Oh, does it make 2 1/1s?
So it makes 1/1/1, then
Okay.
it kills that 1/1, then it makes a second 1/1 after the end of it. That's if you like target the Imp Gang Boss with the Starfall itself. It's very unusual, but it came up in testing with me and Frodan last night. Like, it is logical. I assume it is working as intended, but certainly not what we expected to see when we made it happen. You mentioned the 50-50 going into the potential Game 3. Warrior is a big factor for that for Bunnyhoppor, and this is a specifically built Warrior deck that both himself and Casey, his main practice partner, have brought to this, which this could give us some nightmares throughout the broadcast, Abar, because there is a Youthful Brewmaster in there. There is an Azoth in there. There's also an Archivist Elysiana in there. And people talked about this when the Elysiana nerf first happened, of, well, maybe we just hold on to the coin all game, and then 50% of the time we can still Brewmaster our Elysiana and still make that thing happen. Now there's this little card called Emperor Thorasan, which means that they can guarantee that scenario in certain slow matchups. Thoughts? Concerns? Avar?
That is very possible. I will say this. I think, and I'm not Bunnyhoppor or Casey, the innovators of this archetype, I think we will see N'Zoth being the minion that gets returned by the Youthful Brewmaster more than we will see Archivist Elysiana.
Right.
So I'm not sure if the Warrior Mirror happened to fall upon us that we will be playing 2 50-card decks, but it is possible. It is an option. I still think tempo reigns king even in those kind of matchups. But it's a risk. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, for sure. Even if it does come down to fatigue scenarios in late game Warrior situations, trying to take a turn to like play a 7/7 and then just pull it back off the board is kind of asking to get beaten up by your opponent in a lot of spots. We do see Warrior Mirrors go to fatigue, but they're rarely decided by fatigue. Normally it's who is able to push damage and be aggressive in that fatigue situation to end the game. And bouncing your Elysiana is certainly going to put you on the receiving end of that. We do apologize for the technical difficulties that we are having with our match number 1. Hopefully we are able to get you into that as soon as possible. Okay, looks like we have a match on our hands at least. Bunnyhoppor has kicked things off. Looks like he has a pretty overwhelming advantage right now in the early game.
Yeah, and oof. How do you come back from that one, Sottle? So it looks like we have efficiently established a Northshire Cleric. Bunny has the resources to back it up. He has the Circle of Healing, so if SilverName does develop anything onto the board without clearing this Cleric, Bunnyhoppor is going to be able to use that to his advantage. This is a very precarious situation for SilverName. You mentioned Wild Pyromancer is potentially a card that lets you swing the board back in this matchup, but they are few and far between.
And this is the purest form of casting available. No information available on the opponent's other side of the hand. Just have to make the best play.
Well, our plays won't be biased by seeing both hands. That's one solution to that problem. That's a pretty juicy value trade I'm looking at with this Northshire Cleric. And then the question I have afterward is how do we get the best use out of this circle to follow that up?
I must consider.
Right. I think in the matchup, anytime you can safely cast a Circle of Healing and get good effect out of it is potentially powerful. The question Bunny has to ask is like whether he can make better use of this next turn with potentially Wild Pyromancer, with Acolyte of Pain, and with Circle of Healing on the follow-up. But it does look pretty appealing this turn.
Yeah, from Bunny's position, I'm looking at getting this Light Warden down, going to develop the Wild Pyromancer, Power Word Shield over our Cleric, make that value trade, and then we can draw 4 cards off circle.
In the light's name.
Looks like Bunny's opting to take it a little bit more slowly here.
Silence now picked up for Bunny as well. No such luxury on SilverName's side. And Silence is going to be the card he needs here to go alongside with that Pyromancer. He might just be able to put some kind of clear together if he can find it.
SilverName does have the Wild Pyromancer. He does have 3 spells.
Yeah, so if you Pyro Power Shield and you draw the Silence, you do still get a full clear here.
You do. It's a big risk. I mean, that would be SilverName's one attempt to sort of come back onto the board if this is the spot he decides where it's not getting better from here. You know,
right.
Maybe my best chance is to find the Silence on this specific turn.
He is playing 2 copies of it as well, alongside the 2 Pyromancers. He's found room elsewhere in his deck to do that.
You have best.
Yeah,
and
I think
there it
that's
is.
exactly what he looks for. It would have been a pretty big swing turn there. That's how I was talking about how Pyromancer can still be a very effective card. Silence is, of course, a massively effective card in the mirror as well. It was the combination of those 2 cards that was going to help SilverName get over the line there. So we expected a truncated game because it was a Priest mirror. Apologies that we got an even more truncated game than we expected. Again, apologies for the technical difficulties. Hopefully we can get a handle on that as soon as possible. But now with the Priest win going in the books for Bunnyhoppor, where do we expect this series to go next, Abar?
Whew, well, Bunny's already won with the Priest. You protected his Shaman for a reason. I think there's a pretty good chance that he throws that one out here. Shaman doesn't have too many matchups that are below maybe sub 50-50 a little bit, but it's a safe queue. It's something that regardless of what archetype your opponent chooses, you're going to feel comfortable piloting and have put yourself in a decent position. Bunnyhoppor in particular is a player who is favored queuing this deck as often as he possibly can. I expect that to be the decision from Bunny, which if I'm thinking SilverName's side, to me that means put the Priest right back out there.
Sure, it makes sense to me. Obviously, new meta on ladder, there aren't too many people savage enough to just be queuing combo Priest over and over again. I have run into 1 or 2, but it's not a matchup. What? No, that is false. That is a baseless accusation.
Oh yeah, okay.
Even I will be excited by new decks for like 2 or 3 days until I go back to playing Priest. All right.
2 or 3 days.
But it's not a matchup that I've been able to test extensively beyond focused testing amongst the casters ourselves. How much do you think Shaman has improved in that matchup against Priest? And what was your position on Shaman in the matchup to begin with, like before the changes? Because I think we saw some change in perception on that as well.
So we did see some change in perception. If you look at the data over the course of Grandmasters, the Priest's advantage over the Shaman stayed pretty consistent. It was about a 55 to 45 edge for the Priest player. But particular players, Bunnyhoppor, Casey, of course, his practice partner, seemed to have found some small edges that brought the matchup closer to 50-50. We saw those particular players winning it more often than the field at large. I do think that Shaman has improved with the introduction of Desert Hare and Evolve, partially because those cards are powerful in the matchup if you draw them in tandem, but also partially because of what you're taking out. We see a lot of Quest Shaman players cutting cards like Former Champ, for example. Some of the more expensive cards are what have been taken out of the deck to make room for the Desert Hare Evolve package.
Yeah, it's interesting to me as we take a look at SilverName's Priest again, which I presume is going to be his queue because at the end of the day it's Priest. But I do want to continue talking about Shaman here because it was interesting to me. We actually saw Former Champ being kept in the matchup by some players in Grandmasters in the early weeks, which just seemed so very wrong to me. But now you look at this list, it is much, much leaner. Those Giggling Inventors have gone. Those Former Champs, as you mentioned, have gone. So now you just have this much more smoother, more consistent. It's just a deck that will do something powerful every turn. I think that's a very good way to compete against Priest.
Yeah, I can promise you we will not see any Former Champs kept here in this game.
No.
Because they are gone. They are gone, along with cards like Stormbringer as well we saw popping up into these Shaman decks to give them more edge in the Druid matchup specifically, or other late game matchups like Control Warrior. That's out of here as well. The deck is just simply too efficient to justify the inclusion of those late game cards.
Yeah, my only thought with this deck now is like how much opportunity cost is lost against, say, Control Warrior, for example. If you don't win the game immediately with your Desert Hare Evolve, a lot of these lists are cutting a Bog Slosher, as you see here from Bunnyhoppor. He's down to 1, and then without Former Champs in there as well, that's kind of a board in a can that you lose out of your game plan as well. Do you think it still has the gas to get over the line against Control Warrior?
I think it does, although it's closer to 50-50 than it used to be. It used to be very heavily Shaman favored. Now I still think it's reasonably Shaman favored.
Sure.
It's interesting, though, because the Bunnyhoppor Casey lineup, which they are playing the exact same lineup for those of you at home who are not aware, as they have been doing for weeks, it seems to be soft targeting the Warriors specifically. With their super greedy N'Zoth Warrior, their infinite value Druid deck.
We didn't even talk about Infinite Kun Druid yet. There's so much going on.
Baleful Banker, Elise. Yeah, I can't imagine risking queuing a Control Warrior into this lineup in particular. So the fact that they made their Shaman a little softer in that matchup, I thought was something that I'd be curious to ask them about the thought process there.
Sure. So as predicted, it is going to be the Shaman queued from Bunnyhoppor against the Priest from SilverName.
Well
again, apologies for the limited spectator functionality right now. We are doing the best we can. Hopefully we will get it back to normal as soon as possible. But we do need these games to continue, so the better you can watch them in any way necessary. That's what we're going to move forward with. What's that well played about from SilverName?
What to do?
Well,
no 1-drop? Is that all it is?
No 1-drop, no 2-drop? Yeah, frankly,
yeah, okay.
I respect the man who concedes in the Priest Mirror on turn 5. I respect the man who throws out the well played as he passes turn 1 as Priest.
Sure.
Hey!
SilverName, I think he's trying to keep things light here because he's had some unfortunate starts so far.
He has. That draw is about the worst draw that you would call acceptable, but it is acceptable in terms of what it does to his hand, because now he has options on the following turn. He can choose to just continue to develop with Blade Master, or he can go with the instant tempo play with extra arms. It was just essential, really, I think, for SilverName to have any chance in this matchup that he drew a minion to play that turn.
And though we don't see any emoting coming out on Bunny's side, that's much less his MO. His hand is actually rather suboptimal as well. No Mogu Flesh Shapers, no Desert Hares to combine with this Evolve. He's off to a slow start. SilverName has the opportunity to claw his way onto the board here. Interesting. Faceless Lackey for maximum tempo, and we'll be mutating. Okay, so this is about the most proactive, board-oriented play Bunnyhoppor could have possibly made. Didn't pay out maybe as well as he was hoping for there.
Nope. 1 health on the 3-drop is a problem, but honestly, just the number of bodies that he puts into play here, like even if the Beaming Sidekick trades 1 for 1, like it's just kind of traded with his Cable Rat and his Mutate, and his Cable Rat has given him a card in hand anyway, so it looks awful, but it's actually not that bad in exchange for Bunny, especially as he can just keep tempo here through this Injured Blade Master.
Yeah, and the onus is on SilverName to get the game moving here, not
Yes.
Bunnyhoppor. He's happy to let both players participate in this wet noodle fight if that's what it takes for him to get into the late game, get his quest activated. Weighing his options right now, maybe, is this an evolve turn? Does he want to maximize tempo even further? Or does he slow things down here, maybe play a Questing Explorer alongside his 1-drop?
Yeah, I think we're going to see Sludge Slurper questing this turn. He's going Sludge Slurper first, which means he might be considering going Lackey Evolve this turn. He wants to keep that option open to himself, depending on what Lackey he ends up with. Another Faceless Lackey here could potentially be a huge deal.
The right way.
Interesting ordering. I think I would have defaulted to draw the card first, just because that's the mantra, but when you really look at the situation, I think Lackey first was pretty good in that spot.
Huge 50-50 here. That is exactly what SilverName needed to get back in this one. That had the risk to be the Beaming Sidekick. SilverName knew that it was going to come down to which of these 2 minions he had, and now all of a sudden Bunnyhoppor has to find his way to maybe trade his way back onto the board. Or does he try and ignore this altogether? Begin an aggressive plan.
Well, it's the point of the game where you do start to generate some reads on what your opponent wants to do, and you know your opponent had some real struggles in the early game. Past turn 1, play a 1-drop on turn 2, and then just play a naked 4/3 Blade Master on turn 3. Like, that's not the ideal start. Psycho Pomp in hand kind of, you know, explains the Blade Master play a little bit, but you are starting to give credit to your opponent's hand for either having expensive things like Bonsandi and Armet in it, or having combo pieces like Divine Spirit and Inner Fire, so I think potentially leaving a 4/7 on the board is too scary a prospect here. I can fully respect this clear from Bunnyhoppor.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Quest complete. SilverName. Oh, okay, so now that one is a little higher risk. We still have the Injured Blade Master in the pool. At this point, we have a Beaming Sidekick and another Psycho Pomp in there as well. So the odds that SilverName actually hits a high-value minion are not very high. This Acolyte isn't cleanly contested on the board right now. This is maybe the opportunity for him to get that down. Or does he just feel like he has to hit a 1 and 3 to maximize his tempo to fight for this board at all?
Acolyte does seem weak here. It's just whether you feel like you can take that 1 turn off. I think drawing through the deck is always powerful with Priest. It's why Cleric is just the linchpin of the deck. But the Psycho Pomp is just a much, much higher tempo play here. Even if the 3/1 does die to the 1/1 Lackey, it's asking much more questions of your opponent, I think. Super tough spot, though.
He has the option to Acolyte Divine Spirit.
Sure.
But then if there's a weaponized Wasp on the other side from Bunnyhoppor with the Lackey already on the board, such a painful turn. He is overloaded, though. And there's the Wasp. Nails it. We've definitely seen SilverName taking some risks so far in these two. I mean, game 1 was incredibly brief, but he identified very clearly that he needed to go for a specific top deck early on to have any chance to fight for the board. He's come to these playoffs prepared to take risks, it looked like, regardless of the outcomes.
4/7 is huge, though, because now, even with the hero power activated, there's very limited way that he can take this off the board. Bunnyhoppor committed to clearing on the previous turn, but now if he can't find a way to do so again, he's going to be in serious trouble against this hand from SilverName, which his hand from SilverName just begs for him to stick a minion here because his entire hand just leverages a board position once he can consolidate one.
It's definitely suboptimal to be chipping away at large priest minions without the ability to fully clear them off. Presents a very big threat of Neferset Ritualist negating your turn. So yeah, Bunny is going to choose to ignore ignore the injured Blade Master this turn,
Yep.
rather than dealing some amount of damage to it, which does come with some risk. I mean, Divine Spirit, Power Word Shield, Inner Fire is
Sure.
a very real possibility with SilverName's hand, given how long those cards on the left-hand side of his hand have been stuck there. But there's a lot of ways you can die to Priest. You gotta pick your poison.
Is this as simple this turn for SilverName as make the big guy and go face?
Makes sense to me.
I think Bunnyhoppor almost accepts making this play, that he's probably going to take 14 damage a lot of the time based on the play that's been made. There is that Mogu, though. If Bunny needed something to bail him out of it, he does have Mogu Evolve available to him. There are some 8-drops that can put him in business here.
There are, Tyrion comes to mind, Ironbark Protector comes to mind, the often forgotten 8-mana taunt that could be critical here. I'm trying to look at race situations here, so if you deal 8 damage this turn as Bunnyhoppor, I mean, how often do you just try and ignore this thing and just pray for the Mogu taunt?
I wonder.
I mean, what 8-drop options would allow you to trade into this? You can do 8 damage, you can do 11 with the Weaponized Wasp, and then you need your Mogu to do 7 additional damage.
So there's a Walking Fountain, which is 8 rush damage.
But the Fountain only gets to attack into it once because it's 18 attack.
Very true.
So I actually don't think there is an option from Mogu that lets you clear this, so clearing seems somewhat pointless. I think go face and just hope for the stall out with the Mogu is the best you've got.
Good luck, everybody. And that's game 2.
Had multiple outcomes there, several taunts that can come off just that 8-drop option from the Mogu, but then of course all the other variations in play as well. I think Bunnyhoppor will have spent that turn calculating all those outs, and I don't think, like, unless he got rush from, like, an Alakir from the Mogu plus rush from his other minions as well.
Right.
I don't think there was any realistic world where he was clearing the 18-18. So I think just saying one taunt minion out of any of these minions makes sense to me.
Which is a reasonable percentage of the time with 5 minions on the board. There are a handful of taunts at the 2-mana spot and at the 8-mana spot.
Yeah, just at the 8 mana, it's 22% to get a taunt.
Yeah.
Slightly less than that now because Ragnaros has been added to the pool as well, which isn't
Right.
accounted for in that figure. So yeah, it's kind of a big deal.
But, Saddle, has anything really changed with the release of the new patch? We have 2 quick Priest wins, as far as I can see.
I mean, we saw the card Evolve got cast in one of those Priest matches. That was pretty sweet. But yeah, I think as the day goes on, I'm not sure how the APAC broadcast went in terms of class win rate and so on, but I think as the day goes on, we will, I predict, start to see Shaman come out as more of a powerful class in the metagame. Do you think that's going to be the case as well?
I do too. I honestly, it's early to make definitive calls. The expansion has been out for just 3 days now, but I think Shaman is the new king of the hill. I think it is going to dethrone Priest as we have a larger sample size of games to work with. But boy, I'm hesitant to say that. I mean, Priest has proved a lot of players wrong about a lot of matchups so far.
It has, yeah. I think we are kind of talking about Shaman now in the same sort of tones that we talked about Priest in last season, where it's like, well, you know, its worst matchups are like 50-50 at this point, right? Which I think a lot of players had that sentiment throughout this season about Priest, which is just protect Priest, queue Priest. If you're a good player and you can maximize your opportunities, the bad matchups are close enough anyway that you can win them anyway. I think that remains true for Shaman as well. I think one remaining talking point in this series that we haven't really touched on yet is the presence of Druid, and I know that's something that was interesting you going into this week.
It was. So Druid is the 3rd most popular class across all 3 regions this weekend. I find that particularly interesting because, in my experience, with the addition of some of the new cards into the Shaman, that has made the matchup heavily Shaman favored over the Druid. And then Priest is one of the most polarized matchups we have in the metagame. Over the course of the entire Grandmasters Season 2, Priest was 74% over Druid. 74%. That's one of the more polarized matchups you will see in Hearthstone.
Yes.
So I was curious, is there ever an opportunity to simply not bring Druid this weekend with the threat that these other 2 decks you know everyone is going to be bringing present to the Druid specifically? We saw very few players, only a quarter of them across all 3 regions, shy away from Druid, probably in large part due to just the raw power level of the Druid cards.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. We saw even some players towards the end of the regular season saying that they felt like they had a slight favorable with Shaman against Druid. Primarily, those are the players that were choosing to play Stormbringer in Quest Shaman towards the end of the season. But now with this new build, like I think Desert Hare Evolve early just deletes Druid's win rate from the game. Like it's just gone at that point. So like if you have that draw available to you, and that's somewhere close to 80-90% win rate if you make that play, it cannot be a good matchup for the Druid in that position. So it is an interesting call that so many players have leaned so heavily on Druid going into this. But Caster Curse, of course, we spent so much time talking about Druid and not a Druid to be seen. But honestly, Abar's explanation is probably a good reason why you are not seeing Druid going into this, because there is a Shaman on the other side and a Zoo on the other side. Both players then queue those respective decks because they understand they can punish the Druid coming out from the other player if it happens.
This particular matchup, statistically over Grandmaster Season 2, was exactly 50-50.
Really?
Split for both players. Okay. I expect it to be marginally now in favor of the Shaman with the way they have made their deck leaner. And looking at Bunnyhoppor's hand, he has both the Mogu Flesh Shaper and the Mutate. Those are some of the critical cards in the matchup, so things are looking promising for him. But SilverName's off to a hot start himself.
Yeah, that is the absolute dream start. As Celebrate, normal service has resumed. We are back. We have the player cams. We have our overlay. Apologize for all the technical difficulties. Thank you, everyone, for bearing with us. Hopefully, we have smooth sailing from here. But yeah, smooth sailing for SilverName for sure, because he has the absolute nuts opener, which is Flame Imp. Sometimes in this matchup, you play a Flame Imp and go, oh, I really hope they don't have Sludge Slurper. But if they do, the then best counter-attack to that you can have in your deck is Voidwalker, and SilverName had 2 of them.
Titanic Lackey is looking promising here. It's painful to give up the Lackey as a resource, especially when you have this weaponized Wasp in your hand. But at least on board, it would force SilverName to trade in his Flame Imp if he wants to get through the Sludge Slurper, which has to be attractive for Bunnyhoppor here. He agrees.
Yep.
Maximum trades.
Yep, checkmark number 1. Bunny does get that Flame Imp off the board, which now buys him some time to start to leverage this Sandstorm Elemental, this Mogu Flesh Shaper, this Mutate. It's a really tough matchup to play from the Zoo side, and having recently learned that you are the self-proclaimed best Zoo player in history, he didn't actually say that. Like, have you played this matchup much against Shaman? Because I've tried it, and it's so hard to me to balance aggression with not just having like 6 minions in play, so that like not leaving their minions up and going face so they can Mogu you, but at the same time like you can't take the game to the late game because they're going to beat you there. Like, how does this work, Abar?
It is a very delicate dance. Disease Vulture is an important card for dancing appropriately, because you can, on the turn that you go wide with larger minions than what Zoo is usually accustomed to,
Sure.
so that even when they evolve into an 8-drop, you have the potential to react to that appropriately. Sea Giant is also critical. Only one of those in SilverName's deck, though. When you go wide, the turn that you commit to going wide as Zoo, you like to finish that off with the Sea Giant, so that even when they get their 8-drop out of the deal, you're not behind on board. You put your own big pile of stats on there at the same time that you are prepared for them to do so. Right now, we're seeing a little bit more of a grindy hand out of SilverName. He's got his high health, low attack minions, which isn't particularly where you want to be, because like you said, the clock is ticking on the Zoo side more so than the Shaman.
SilverName looks like he's going to use his turn to generate some pressure, which does make sense based on what Abar was saying up until this point, but now Bunnyhoppor's hand is starting to become very much live. The problem is that the Lackey weaponized Wasp combination will take a minion off the other side of the board and therefore increase the cost of his Mogu again by 1. So if he does kill a minion with that Wasp, the Mogu Flesh Shaper will be 1 too expensive to come down on this board state.
Questing Explorer looks like a good start to me. I think I would like to see that come down and then reevaluate my options based on what I draw. Desert Hare. Okay, so no evolve yet. So I do like the Ethereal Lackey. Sandstorm Elemental just isn't efficient here. And then Mogu Mutate is going to come down this turn.
Yes.
So the question is, which of these cards support us from that position? Looks like Bunny decides, I want to use my 1 remaining mana this turn, so he takes the Frost Shot.
Yep. I think being able to lock free attack off the board with that Frost Shock is potentially very powerful, because now you can see he can protect this 6/6 from the board a lot of the time. He does know his opponent has lackeys in hand with a Magic Carpet though, so it is optimistic to think this thing will survive, but at the same time he can still make SilverName's life a lot more difficult here in terms of clearing it.
Vanilla 6/6 in the Test Gray main is somewhat below average in terms of the outcomes that you can get off of evolving a Mogu Flesh Shaper. Poor Bunnyhoppor only got 0 mana +3/+3 in stats out of his Mutate there, so you gotta feel for him.
And Bunnyhoppor has very much been a bat-ahead gamer up until this point with his Mogu Mutates that let him down when he needed it the most. This Flame Imp draw though. What
Absolutely
a turn
critical.
this turned into.
Oh ho, ho, ho. Okay. Take the value trades where you can. You will see a lot of that value trading stop happening when Bunnyhoppor completes his quest, because the ability to double up on a Sandstorm Elemental makes it kind of silly to leave your own board at low health totals, but right now he is protecting critical minions in the Disease Vulture and the Magic Carpet. Just wants to keep this board state secure as long as possible. Bunnyhoppor, ooh, this hand looks rather empty. Tempo Life Drinker here?
You're upsetting me, Abar. I don't like any of these words.
Do you prefer Tempo Desert Hair?
That upsets me more. Yeah, okay. I see where you're coming from.
You can get a totem that way, for whatever that's worth.
There is little time.
I mean, from Bunnyhopper's perspective, we need to complete this quest as efficiently as possible. That means spending the most mana on a battle cry you can this turn, I imagine. So I would like to see the Life Drinker come down. The key in this hand is the Sandstorm Elemental. That is our ticket to potentially fighting back. But no, Bunny does favor going wide here, maybe forcing SilverName to make some trades for him because he has to respect the Desert Hair.
Sure.
Granted, any 1-drop from SilverName's side has a rush, so making some number of trades isn't exactly particularly inconvenient.
Yeah. And Bunnyhoppor also has the information that 2 of these cards are lackeys that will be able to rush into the board this turn.
Crystallize also an excellent pickup here. 1-drop, get rush off the Magic Carpet, trigger the Diseased Vulture, Shriek. Wow.
Really?
I was not expecting that. I would not want to be damaging my own board state if I were SilverName here. I mean, obviously he can't see the Sandstorm Elemental as we can, but that feels like the way that Bunnyhoppor comes back from this position.
Right. It's Sandstorm Elemental and it's Mind Control Tech at this point, right? Like those are the 2 things you're concerned about. So I don't know if SilverName is trying to engineer a situation here where he blows up some of his own board to not get Mind Control Tech, but that would seem a pretty extreme reaction to the situation. Nope. Certainly not if this is happening.
I think Bunny's Gambit is paying off here as SilverName is going to make some trades. This Desert Hair. Ooh! The Silverback Patriarch.
That is the single best Silverback Patriarch in history. Almost gave SilverName the luxury to go face there if he wanted against those 1/1s in play, but I think shutting down the Evolve option was still very sensible for him. He has an incredibly secure board state even against 1 Sandstorm Elemental. Hero Power, Sandstorm, and Mind Control Tech is not a possibility from Bunny with the mana that he has available.
He's also just staring down 15 damage, which leads me to believe that he has at most 2 more turns to secure this board state back for himself.
Right.
Which makes me think, do we ever... Okay, yeah, so he's going to lead Life Drinker here. I think what he's hoping for is the second Sandstorm Elemental off the top of his deck to do both of them in the same turn.
This is the one that says damage on it, or the one that secures your board against various AoE options?
The board feels rather secure from this position. I like the one that says damage.
I still really want to know what the plan for this Shriek was.
Yeah.
Because he was offered Discoverer Lackey, which is just an incredibly strong card. Like, you play that card in your deck, right? Like, it feels like that was the option to me. It's not, I did have a brief thought of like, oh, maybe he's planning to like bust through Giggling Inventor later in the game with this, but that's just not a card in Bunnyhoppor's deck anymore. So it's not one that you need to play around.
In the world where he does lose control of this board state, he could potentially Shriek and then follow it up by redeveloping another board.
Sure.
So maybe he's playing around that disaster scenario, but this board is about as full as you can get.
No, not the Patriot. He was doing such good work for you, SilverName.
F for respect. So now double Sandstorm doesn't even do it. So we're looking at Mind Control Tech Miracles, Evolve Miracles.
You win.
Nope. You are asking for some serious miracles out of like a 4-drop and a 3-drop in that situation to evolve your way out of that. Like, I don't know, Restless Mummy Wolf Rider? Like, what kind of nonsense are you even looking for in that position to get out of it? I think it's a very responsible concede from Bunnyhoppor in that situation. But that is a big win for SilverName. And as you mentioned, SilverName, much, much improved performance in Season 2 over Season 1.
Improved performance, also the only player in the European region bringing Zoo this weekend. He put his money on Zoo, and immediately it pays off for him. We'll see if that trend continues, but off to a promising start.
Yeah, it's certainly not a deck that I was predicting we would see. I did play around with Imp Gang Boss a little bit, and like Imp Gang Boss is a very good card, don't get me wrong, but I was underwhelmed that, you know, when I'm playing Zoo, like, my new card is an Imp Gang Boss, and their new card puts 3-4 drops on the board on turn 3, you know, like, it didn't quite feel like it was stacking up, but it certainly did in that situation. Just good old Zoo stuff, right? Like, he had a smooth curve, he curved out, and Bunny just didn't really have the answers to come back into that. But now is SilverName will move forward to play Hunter Ace in our next matchup, while Bunnyhoppor will fall into the lower bracket to take on Pavel, who finished 4th place in his division and therefore had a free loss essentially in this bracket. Bunnyhoppor now gets a second bite at the apple against Pavel later on, but we do have Hunter Ace versus SilverName coming up as soon as possible. Don't go anywhere, guys.